My name is Maya Calder, and I am 34 years old. That summer evening in Desert Ridge, Phoenix, I thought I was walking into my parents' home with proof that I finally mattered. Proof that I was no longer the invisible middle child. Tucked in my purse was a promotion letter that bumped me up to senior project manager at one of the most respected event firms in Arizona. On my finger was a modest but perfect ring from Noah, the man who made me feel seen in a way my family never had. The Calder dining room had always been less a table and more a stage. That night was no different. My father, Victor, sat at the head, booming into his phone about my brother Brandon's startup. My mother, Lena, hovered near the kitchen, hanging on every word Renee offered about another real estate victory. The air buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. My family was already celebrating, just not me. I lingered in the doorway, clutching a carefully wrapped gift in gold paper, a photo album I'd spent weeks assembling. Childhood snapshots, my parents' wedding, even Brandon's awkward middle school braces, decades of family history glued and captioned with love. I had pictured it softening the edges before I announced my engagement, before I revealed the six-figure savings I had built on my own. For once, I hoped they might beam with pride. "Hey, Mom," I tried, holding out the package. "I made something for you and Dad." Lena barely glanced. "Just set it somewhere, Maya. We're in the middle of something important." Renee smirked over the rim of her wine glass, her manicure gleaming under the chandelier. Brandon didn't even look up from his phone. Dinner began, roasted chicken steaming as Victor carved with deliberate flair. Every slice of meat came with another brag about Brandon's pitch deck or Renee's celebrity clients. My fork hovered over my plate, my chest tight. But I forced a steady smile. Finally, I cleared my throat. "Everyone, I have something to share." For one brief moment, they paused. Victor's knife stilled. Lena's eyebrow arched. Renee tilted her head like she was indulging a child. Brandon actually raised his eyes from his screen. "I was promoted to senior project manager last week," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "And Noah and I." The words hadn't even left my lips when Victor's fork clattered onto his plate. "Promoted? For planning parties? Maya, that's not a career. That's a hobby. Why can't you be more like Brandon, building something real? Or Renee, a lawyer with actual influence?" The room erupted. Lena smirked as though it were the punchline to an old joke. Renee let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Brandon's mouth curved into a grin he didn't bother to hide. Something inside me shifted, quiet and final. I could have rattled off the clients who trusted me with million-dollar budgets, the city festivals that ran flawlessly under my watch, the donors who credited my events with saving their nonprofits. I could have begged them to recognize the fiancé who loved me for more than appearances. But I knew, with a clarity that stunned me, that none of it would matter. Not here. Not to them. So I smiled. A slow, deliberate smile that made Lena's smirk falter, that stole the amusement from Renee's eyes. I slid my chair back, the scrape echoing against a tile, and rose. I left the untouched album on the sideboard. My purse felt light in my hand. "Maya?" Victor's voice cut through the sudden hush. "Where are you going?" I didn't answer. The front door clicked shut behind me, the desert night wrapping me in its warm, dry silence. In my car, I pulled out my phone, thumb steady. For years I had been their safety net, covering mortgages, medical bills, law school tuition. They had never thanked me, only demanded more. I opened the banking app and canceled the auto transfers, froze the family emergency credit card they'd pushed me to open under my name. Then, in the family group chat, I typed 6 words. No more transfers, no more bailouts. And then, after a pause, "Good luck." I hit send. The screen glowed for a moment, then dimmed as I powered the phone off. The house behind me hummed with chatter I no longer needed to hear. Ahead of me stretched a road I had never dared to take until that moment. The morning light in Phoenix is merciless, flooding through blinds as though daring you to face what you've put off. I woke to a phone vibrating across my nightstand like a wasp trapped in glass. Dozens of missed calls. Texts stacked one atop another, demanding, pleading, accusing. I didn't open a single one. Instead, I brewed coffee and laid out a folder I had quietly assembled over the years. Receipts, statements, proof. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. My grandfather, Arthur Lowell, had taught me early, Maya, kindness without memory gets rewritten. Document what you do. Families forget what's inconvenient. So I had. Every Zelle transfer labeled mortgage, every wire for Dad's hospital stay, every cashier's check for Renee's bar prep fees. Even an email from Lena, dated 5 years back, thanking me for helping us again this month. We'll settle it later. Later had never come. I spread the papers across my kitchen table, each one a silent witness. Totals glared back at me. $500 a month for nearly 4 years, the mortgage my parents pretended they paid themselves. $3,000 for Victor's cardiac stent procedure. $5,000 wired to Renee during her last semester of law school. Countless small rescues. Brandon's startup bridge costs, Lena's credit card bill when she'd accidentally overspent at Nordstrom. The numbers told the story they had always refused to see. I wasn't useless. I was their lifeline. My phone buzzed again. Another call from Mom, then Dad, then Renee. I powered it on briefly, just long enough to enter the family group chat. Since you call me useless, let's be clear. Mortgage, $72,000. Dad's surgery, $3,000. Renee's fees, $5,000. Brandon's tools, $8,400. Paid by me. From today, I am done. I hit send, attached 3 screenshots of bank transfers, and shut the phone off again. 10 minutes later, my kitchen phone rang. The landline I kept mostly for telemarketers and my grandfather. I answered. Maya, Grandpa Art's voice rasped, thick with both age and a kind of restrained pride. You finally drew the line. My throat tightened. They're going to spin it like I betrayed them. They can spin until they're dizzy, he said firmly. I already called Victor this morning, told him exactly what I thought of calling his own daughter useless while bleeding her dry. He sputtered like a man choking on his own pride. I let out a shaky laugh, half relief, half sorrow. You didn't have to. Yes. I did, he interrupted. I won't be around forever, Maya. They need to hear it from someone who won't benefit from your silence. You did more for them than a parent should ever ask. Now you take that energy and build for yourself. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, listening to the hum of his oxygen machine in the background. He had always been the one person who noticed, who reminded me that family isn't measured in applause, but in presence. After the call, I sat back, staring at the spread of receipts across the table. For years, I had thought love meant endurance, meant swallowing insults while wiring another transfer. But the papers in front of me told another truth. Love without respect curdles into exploitation. That night, I placed the folder into my desk drawer, labeled it Calder Closed Account. Not out of spite, but as a reminder. I was not crazy. I was not ungrateful. I was done. The silence from my phone felt heavier than any insult I'd carried. But beneath it was something startling, something fierce. The beginnings of freedom. The Calder house in Desert Ridge had always looked unshakable. Stucco walls the color of desert sand, red-tiled roof catching the Arizona sun. But without my invisible payments, cracks began to show fast. It started with envelopes. Plain white, stamped in red. Past due. When the mortgage autodraft failed for the first time, the bank didn't wait long. Within weeks, a notice of default arrived, taped bluntly to the front door for the whole neighborhood to see. Lena ripped it down, hissing at Victor for leaving it there too long, but the neighbors had already walked their dogs past it. Whispers travel quickly in suburban streets. Inside, the arguments were relentless. You couldn't keep your mouth shut, could you? Lena spat at Victor one night, pacing the kitchen. Calling her useless. Now look! Victor slammed his fist against the counter, rattling a half-empty bottle of wine. She was always going to run. Don't pin this on me. You laughed right along with Renee. Meanwhile, Renee's empire wobbled. A glossy article in the Phoenix Business Journal had painted her as unstoppable, but behind the curtain, she'd already sunk her commission advances into expensive marketing. When I pulled my support, she no longer had the liquidity to front escrow fees. One client, an athlete with too many options and too little patience, pulled out of a downtown condo purchase. Rumors spread that Renee was overextended. In her world, reputation was everything. Brandon wasn't faring any better. His startup had been floating on fumes, kept alive by short-term bridges I'd quietly covered. When I froze the joint credit card in my name, he discovered he'd racked up nearly $8,000 in software subscriptions and cloud costs. The bank flagged it as misuse. Not criminal, but enough to freeze his account. Overnight, Brandon's swagger curdled into panic. He picked up night shifts at a data center just to keep his engineers paid. The boy genius of our family was suddenly the guy sleeping on a cot between server racks. And still, they kept calling. I ignored every ring. It was Grandpa Art who finally intervened. He summoned them all to a video call. Victor and Lena in the Desert Ridge kitchen, Renee in her sleek office, Brandon bleary-eyed with a headset still around his neck. Art sat in his recliner, oxygen tubing looped under his nose, but his eyes burned with steel. You've bled Maya dry, he began without preamble. Mortgage, surgeries, tuition, she carried you, and you mocked her for it. Now you want her back because the bills are real again? Shame on every one of you. Dad. Victor started, but Art's voice cut sharp. No, you don't get to spin this as loyalty. Loyalty isn't extortion dressed as family duty. Lena crossed her arms, her voice cracking. We didn't realize. You realized every month when her transfer hit your account, Art snapped. The call devolved quickly. Renee accused Victor of being too harsh. Victor shot back that Renee had laughed loudest at dinner. Brandon muttered something about miscommunication. Art finally leaned back, disgust written across his face. Fix your own mess, he said flatly. And with a deliberate click, he ended the call. Later, he rang me privately. They're tearing each other apart now. Good. Maybe they'll finally see what they lost. I sat in my apartment, the silence around me steady, unbroken by family demands. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating what I could spare for them. Instead, I was calculating something new, what it might mean to live fully for myself. The weeks after I cut ties with my family felt strangely weightless, like I had been holding my breath for decades and was finally allowed to exhale. Instead of fielding frantic phone calls, I poured myself into work, planning one of the biggest corporate galas Phoenix had seen in years. Hundreds of moving pieces, permits, vendors, security, catering, insurance, all coordinated by me. People called it party planning. I called it risk management under fire. At the event, a storm threatened to shut down the entire evening, but I'd already drawn up contingency plans, negotiated emergency tents, and mapped alternate load-in routes. The gala went off without a hitch, dazzling donors and saving the client from what could have been a multi-million-dollar embarrassment. That night, my boss pulled me aside, her hand firm on my shoulder. Maya, you don't just plan parties, you protect reputations. She told me the board would soon vote to promote me to director of projects. It wasn't just a title, it was validation, proof that my work held weight in the real world, even if my family had never seen it. At home, Noah and I sat cross-legged on the floor of our small apartment, surrounded by house listings. This one in Scottsdale, he said, pointing to a modest two-bedroom with a sunlit backyard. Close to your office, big enough for a dog if we ever decide. We laughed, but I knew what I wanted. A home. Not a showpiece, not a trophy, but a space where I could breathe without judgment. We met with a financial planner, something my family had never considered necessary. She looked over our accounts and nodded approvingly. You've done the right thing, separating finances, no co-signing with extended family, and documenting everything. Protect this. Boundaries aren't just emotional, they're legal. Her words settled into me like armor. A week later, Grandpa Art invited me to lunch at a quiet diner off the highway. He slid an envelope across the table, his weathered hands trembling slightly. Inside was a notarized letter, a formal statement that the money he'd given me over the years were gifts, not loans. He didn't want anyone twisting the narrative later. Beneath it, another paper. A deed transfer. Modest but deliberate. His old trailer lot in Sedona, placed into a revocable trust with me as the successor trustee. "It's not much," he said, sipping his black coffee, "but it's yours, and it's clean. No one can touch it. I wanted you to have something that's safe." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Grandpa, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he interrupted gently. "Paperwork protects what love can't. Your parents will learn that the hard way. You won't." I folded the documents back into the envelope, tucking them into my purse as though they were gold. Because in a way, they were. Not for the land, not for the legal jargon, but for what they meant. Someone in my family trusted me enough to prepare, not exploit. That night, Noah and I signed the offer on the Scottsdale home. When I slid my name across the page, my hand didn't tremble. For the first time, I was building something entirely mine, untethered from Victor's scorn, from Lena's dismissals, from the endless demands of Brandon and Renee. The house wasn't big, wasn't flashy, but it was ours. And unlike the Calder home, it would never be built on someone else's sacrifice. The Calder home was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a pressure cooker. By late summer, the notice of trustees' sale arrived, an official date stamped in bold announcing that unless the mortgage was brought current, the Desert Ridge property would be auctioned off. Victor ripped the letter into pieces and hurled it into the trash, but the damage was done. Everyone in the cul-de-sac knew. Neighbors whispered over hedges, shaking their heads. Inside, the walls reverberated with shouting. Lena accused Victor of destroying the family's image. If you hadn't humiliated her at dinner, she'd still be paying. Victor shot back that Lena had spent recklessly for years, always assuming Maya will cover it. Their voices carried through the house like knives. Renee's carefully crafted reputation faltered next. Phoenix real estate is an unforgiving arena. Word spreads faster than listings. After losing that celebrity client, whispers of cash strapped attached themselves to her name. She tried to mask it, arriving at open houses in designer suits and rented luxury cars, but colleagues noticed the cracks. When escrow officers began asking for proof of funds up front, she scrambled. Her credit cards maxed, her investors pulled back, and for the first time, Renee's phone stopped ringing with opportunity. Brandon, meanwhile, had been gutted. His startup, once his badge of brilliance, was now a leaking boat. He worked nights at a data center, stumbling through days like a ghost. The swagger was gone, replaced with an edge of desperation. One evening, half drunk and sleepless, he texted me, "Can we talk? Just need advice." I stared at the message, thumb hovering. For years I had been his silent investor, his fallback plan. But I left the message unread, because advice was just another form of unpaid labor, and I was done giving. Grandpa Art called me the following Sunday. "They're unraveling," he said flatly. "They held a family dinner without you. It turned into a tribunal. Blame ricocheting from one to the other. Renee accused your father of favoritism. Brandon accused Renee of entitlement." Lena cried. Victor yelled until his voice cracked. "They're like a ship without a captain, each one pointing fingers while the hull takes on water." I didn't gloat, but I also didn't ache the way I once would have. Instead, I brewed chamomile tea, curled up with Noah on the couch, and listened. Art cleared his throat on the line. "I'm proud you stayed silent. Sometimes silence is the sharpest blade." That night I sat at my desk and opened a journal. For the first time, I put into words what I'd carried unspoken for years. Love is not measured by sacrifice. Family without respect is a contract without terms. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are clarity. I called the entry the manifesto. Not to send, not to weaponize, but to remind myself, to anchor me when the guilt returned, as it sometimes still did in the quiet. Meanwhile, their chaos continued to spread, like cracks spidering across glass. The Calder home, once their fortress of superiority, was just weeks away from collapse, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't standing beneath it, holding the beams. The desert sky that evening blazed pink and gold, as though Arizona itself wanted to bless what was coming. Our backyard in Scottsdale was strung with twinkle lights. Chairs borrowed from friends lined up in two neat rows. There was no grand cathedral, no lavish reception hall. Just the home Noah and I had built together, modest and real. I stood in a flowing ivory dress, bouquet of desert wildflowers trembling slightly in my hands. Across the yard, Noah waited beneath a wooden arch draped with fabric and eucalyptus. His smile was steady, the kind that promised safety. Only one family member sat in the front row, Grandpa Art. His hands shook as he clutched his cane, but his eyes gleamed, proud and moist. The oxygen tubing snaked against his cheek, but he had insisted on being here, telling me, "Don't you dare get married without me watching." As the music began, I walked toward Noah. Each step felt like closing the distance between the life I'd endured and the life I had chosen. My chest swelled, not with nerves, but with freedom. Midway through the ceremony, a courier slipped quietly into the yard, setting a padded envelope on the gift table. I didn't notice it until after Noah and I exchanged vows, until after the kiss that erupted in cheers and laughter from our small circle of friends. Later, when the crowd dispersed into soft chatter, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from Art's attorney and a recorded deed. My grandfather had set up a living trust, leaving me not just the Sedona lot, but also a modest fund he wanted converted into annual scholarships for underprivileged students. "Maya," his note read in careful cursive, "you know better than anyone that money can either chain you or free you. Use this to free others. It's my way of multiplying the strength you've shown." Tears blurred my vision. Noah slipped an arm around me, whispering, "He believes in you. I do too." Later that night, as we danced under the stars, someone mentioned in passing that the Calder home had officially gone to auction. My parents had moved into a cramped apartment on the outskirts of Phoenix. Renee's reputation in real estate had collapsed further. Colleagues now spoke her name not with envy but as a cautionary tale. Brandon still labored at night, barely keeping his head above water, his startup now a hollow shell. I didn't celebrate their downfall. I didn't mourn it either. Their choices had built that future, brick by brick. Instead, I focused on what lay in front of me, Noah's hand steady in mine, Art smiling faintly from his chair, our friends clinking glasses around us. For the first time in my life, I wasn't defined by their scorn, their demands, their endless hunger. I was defined by my own boundaries, by love that asked nothing more than honesty, by a future that was mine. And as the music swelled, I remembered the words I had written in my manifesto. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are clarity. That night, beneath the desert stars, clarity had never felt so beautiful.